Another fine show brought to you by the Law of Attraction Radio Network. The Law of Attraction Talk Radio is the radio show that is changing the world through science and spirituality as we realize that our well-being and our happiness is through our own thoughts. The Law of Attraction Talk Radio with Jules.
Well, welcome to Law of Attraction Talk Radio. I'm Jules from really incredibly beautiful Southern California. What a gorgeous spring day here in paradise. I want to welcome you to this evening's show. We're going to be talking once again to Robert Schwartz, who you may remember is the author of Courageous Souls, and that's now being re-released as Your Soul's Plan, Discovering the Real Meaning of Life You Planned Before You Were Born. So we are absolutely delighted to have Robert back. Now, let's get on with tonight's show with Robert Schwartz, author of the new title of the book, Your Soul's Plan, Discovering the Real Meaning of Life You Planned Before You Were Born. Here's just a little bit of background on Robert. In a personal session with a medium in 2003, Robert Schwartz was astonished to speak with non-physical beings who knew everything about him, not just what he had done in his life, but also what he had thought and felt. They told him that he had planned many of the most difficult experiences before he was born, realizing that a knowledge of pre-birth planning would bring in great healing to many people and allow them to understand the deeper purpose of their life challenges. He devoted the next 3 years to studying the pre-birth plans of dozens of individuals. Prior to his spiritual awakening, Mr. Schwartz was a freelance journalist for such publications as Life magazine and U.S. News and World Report. Very, very excited. Well, thanks for coming back on, Robert. This is just wonderful that you could join us tonight.
It's a pleasure to be back, Jules.
Oh, I'm thrilled to have you back. And, you know, this is so exciting because I hear you were picked up by another publisher. Is that correct? Is that the reason for the name change?
Yes, that's right. The original title of the book, Courageous Souls, Do We Plan Our Life Challenges Before Birth? That is a self-published edition, and I came out with that at the end of 2006, beginning of 2007. But last year, North Atlantic Books, specifically their Frog Books imprint, picked it up, and they are releasing it on March 24th under the title you mentioned, Your Soul's Plan, Discovering the Real Meaning of the Life You Planned Before You Were Born. And we have a website at yoursoulsplan.com for your listeners, and they can download part of the book for free there.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Well, I'm very excited for you. I think that's wonderful. I'm glad you got picked up by a publisher. This is great. It's going to get in the hands of more people, don't you think?
Well, one of the things I'm most excited about is that it's going to be distributed worldwide by Random House. And I've always felt that what I'm trying to do here is make this information about how we plan our lives before we're born available to anybody who would like to know about it. And so the fact that it will get this kind of distribution is something that's very gratifying to me.
Oh, absolutely. That's wonderful. You're really going to be touching the world here. Now let's start off at the beginning and talk about what inspired you to delve into writing a book about souls, because really you were into, Life magazine, you were into doing other kinds of articles, so this is really, really something for you.
Well, you know, I was a freelance journalist, as you mentioned, for a number of years, and then I transitioned from that actually into more corporate work. I picked up an MBA at one point, and I was doing corporate marketing and communications, basically business writing, which was not at all fulfilling to me. And I often tell people that I had the feeling that if I fell off the face of the earth, none of my clients would even know that I was gone. They would just put someone else into my place and carry right along. So it was really, Jules, a career crisis of sorts that launched me on this path, although I didn't know it at the time. But under the pretext of trying to figure out what my higher calling or higher purpose was in life, I went for the very first time ever to work with a medium, and this was in May of 2003. It's actually on May 7th, and I remember the day because really everything in my life changed on that particular day. The medium was able, in this case, to channel my spirit guides, and they introduced to me this concept of pre-birth planning, that we plan our lives, including our greatest challenges, before we're born. Now, coming from a very conventional background, as I did, and having sort of a reporter's mentality, I found this difficult to accept. And I think I probably would have discarded the entire idea as some sort of fantasy, except that in this session with the medium, as you said in your introduction, information came up from the guides that indicated that they knew literally everything about me. And I mean, they knew not only what I had done in my life, but they knew about private thoughts and private feelings that I had never shared with anyone before. And I'll give your listeners an example because this made such a deep impression on me. Mm-hmm. The guides referred to a prayer that I had said privately in my own home, alone, and silently, not even aloud, but silently, 5 years earlier. Now, I had been going through a very difficult time in my personal life then, and the prayer I said was very short and simple. It was, "Dear God, I can't get through this alone. Please send help." Now, this was 5 years ago. I had even forgotten that I had said this, but the guides knew about it. They reminded me of it, and they said to me through the medium, "Your prayer was answered," by which I believe they meant that additional non-physical guidance had been sent to me. And they went on and they said a number of other things like that to indicate that they knew the most private aspects of my life that I had never shared with anybody. So when they introduced this idea of pre-birth planning, at that point in the conversation, they had said enough to establish their credibility beyond any doubt. And when they brought up this idea, I was listening very, very closely. And in the days and weeks after this session was over, I thought about this idea constantly, and I realized it was something that could bring great healing to people. In other words, I think there's a tendency when something quote-unquote bad happens to us, we often don't see any deeper meaning to it. It just seems like random arbitrary suffering, like God or the universe is punishing us. But if we could understand that in many cases, it's something we ourselves set up as a challenge before birth to foster our own growth and evolution, then it becomes rich with meaning, it has purpose, and the meaning and purpose lighten the suffering and allow us to look at it in a completely different way.
Yeah. Well, so you, in your book, you took a lot of people, or quite a few people, that had really disturbing things that happened to them that they didn't quite understand, and you met with the psychic mediums to get them answers as to why things were happening to them. Is that correct?
The book, Your Soul's Plan, the chapters are organized by type of life challenge. So there's a chapter on the pre-birth planning of physical illness, a chapter on the pre-birth planning of deafness and blindness, alcoholism and drug addiction, the death of a loved one, having handicapped children, severe accidents, challenges like that are fairly common. And the reason I set it up this way is that I wanted to cover things that a lot of people have experienced, and they wonder why did this happen to them or to someone that they know. And then we did exactly what you just said. Each person I spoke with, they had usually 2, sometimes 3 sessions with different mediums and channels in which we would pose the question to Spirit, did this person plan this challenge before he or she was born, and if so, why? And then in the book, Your Soul's Plan, I present the information that comes forward from Spirit as to why this event or this challenge was planned before birth. And the reason for working with different mediums and channels was to cross-check the information that was coming forward and also to get complementary or supplemental information about the pre-birth plan. Importantly, the different mediums and channels who are my collaborators have different sets of skills that allow them to access this information from different points of view. For example, I worked with a woman in Arizona, Stacy Wells, who can actually see and hear the conversations we have with one another before we're born. So by working with her, we were able to actually listen in on the pre-birth planning sessions and hear souls talking to each other, to their future children, their future parents, future spouses, lovers, friends, enemies in some cases, and I put these conversations word for word into the book.
To hear the rest of this interview, go to Law of Attraction Radio Network or iTunes under Law of Attraction Talk Radio Podcasts.